That Was Yesterday podcast is brought to you by Define Mind and Body Wellness, my wellness center here in Glastonbury, Connecticut, where we specialize in holistic services to help shortcut the process so that you can see results fast, but learn to do it in a habitual way. So many of the topics we talk about are part of the program that our clients receive, except they get much more in-depth detail. Also, my workbook of the 10-week program to lose and never look back, which is only available to our patients at Define. If you are interested in holistic body fat spot reduction, or our pod to increase your metabolism, or our cold plunge, or our sauna, which is the best sauna in the world, that I promise you. I know that sounds biased, but you'll see for yourself. Please go to definewellnesscenter.com. You will be prompted to put your information in, and make sure to mention podcast when you do, as you will be eligible for a bigger discount on our introductory services because you are a listener. Appreciate you. Have a great day and enjoy today's podcast.
The thing I realized after working with, so many people over the last few decades now is that, yes, there's some confusion around things, and certainly there's an overwhelm of information when it comes to nutrition and exercise and fitness, and too much information. And oftentimes people are never really told and taught good systems, right? A food pyramid we grew up on was garbage. The one that happened since is, but even with that food pyramid we grew up in, we weren't really taught like the nutrition side of it. It was just sort of like, I don't know. I have my own theories about it. I mean, it was very much commodity based. If you look at the base of the base of the foundation of the pyramid, I mean, 8 to 11 servings of white bread, rice, and cereal per day. I mean, you tell me a healthy adult who eats that much, who's not a professional athlete, like they don't exist. So why did they have it like that? Well, for you to think about. Like I said, I have my own thoughts on it, but nonetheless, many of us were never taught good, solid, basic foundational nutrition and health. That aside, though, if we had a gun to your head, and I use that as an image because it gets you thinking. If I said gun to the head, hey, what are 3 things you need to do right now that would improve your health? You probably would know those 3 things, and it would be pretty basic things, right? So the issue for most of us isn't the knowledge in that case, because even with all the overwhelm, it's really the internal conflict. Perhaps with the overwhelm, it's the inner perfectionist of like, well, I could do this, but if that's the best thing to do, maybe I should do that. It's like wanting to make things perfect and know with certainty before taking action. That's often reflective of what I call the inner perfectionist, or the inner critic of being like, well, you're just not healthy enough to move. You need to move, but you're just, you got to lose weight before you start moving, right? Like, people know they need to move, but there's so many people I've talked to over the years who have in their head they have to lose weight before they exercise, which is crazy if you really think about it, because like it's a very subjective thing when we talk about exercise. It doesn't have to be a CrossFit workout. Like, can literally be 5 minutes. In fact, it should be 5 minutes. And if you can get up and down off the toilet or walk and get out in and out of your car, you can exercise, right? So there's always a way to do stuff, even if you are like have mobility issues standing. I've worked with women with fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, who are on walkers, and they can exercise. Like, you can exercise, right? If you can move, you can exercise. So again, it goes back to like, it's not a objective issue, it's a subjective issue, and that happens between our head. And so the internal conflict is kind of where I want to focus today. For the most part, you know what to eat, you should move more, what works mostly for you, right? Like if and again, what gets in the way is a lot of layers of stuff. And sometimes when you think about what works for you, this is where it gets really tricky. Because for example, like I've had a lot of people tell me low carb works for me. When I cut out carbs, or it used to work for me, when I cut out carbs completely, I was able to lose weight, or I was able to lose weight, and now I'm not, is what I hear a lot of, especially when women are hitting menopause. They used to be able to do things like that, see a change, and now metabolism slow down enough where they're not. But what I would always say in those situations is like, but did it? Well, yeah, I lost a ton of weight. Yeah, but how much of that weight did you keep off? oh, I gained it all back. That's because, and then they start to blame themselves. But no, like it didn't work. If you gained it back, it didn't work, right? Like nobody ever starts a way to eat just so they can gain it back. And I've made it my life's mission to try to figure out how to get people to sustain, not perfection, not your best body, but your best iteration of you that you can do right now, whatever that is, or at least working towards it, right? And so, on a side note, there, I do think there is utility to cutting out carbs completely, because when you have for a short period of time, if you have a lot of cellular inflammation, because if you have a lot of cellular inflammation, most carbs, and I say when I refer to carbs, I'm referring to the carbs that are causing damage to people most of the time, which are your pastas, your potatoes, your rice, those types of carbs, not fruits and vegetables, right? Barring no food sensitivities, nobody on earth has ever gotten overweight or unhealthy by eating too much fruit or vegetables. Those are never the issues. It's the other carbs that are the issues. The processed carbs, of course, are the issue. But the point being is that I use the no carb example as like that doesn't work long term. But if you have the right plan, that can be a strategy in the short term. But the point of all of this is that you have to, like, when you're making these types of changes, you want to think about, like, where am I going with this? And is this something I can sustain? And in the case, if you have a lot of cellular inflammation, it might make sense for you to cut out carbs completely. And I'm not suggesting anybody here does that right now. I'd want to have a conversation with you on that, but it shouldn't be more than, 10 to 12 weeks. And then there should be a plan to reverse engineer carbs back into your life, which would be the carb rotating that I talk a lot about in our Never Look Back eating plan. But the point is like, when you think the why things didn't work, if you go back to that low carb example, the issue there is that it was all or nothing. And if that's what you think from a philosophical standpoint, that you have to be all or nothing at your core to see a change, then you're going to constantly yo-yo, because you can't sustain all or nothing. Well, you can't sustain all anyway. Nothing, you can survive for a period of time, but it's not ideal. So that's the gap that we're talking about, is like closing that gap, So what's important to understand is I talk a lot about like parts work, right? I mentioned the inner critic, the inner perfectionist. I'm a voice dialogue facilitator. So in my hypnosis, I use I integrate a lot of parts work into hypnosis, because to me, that is the most objective way to understand your emotions, because emotions are by definition subjective. They're what you feel, and they're not wrong. It's what you feel, but it's also not the reality. So there's two different things at play. And so when you can use stuff like voice dialogue or parts work, you can kind of project your emotions in a logical way. So you can kind of almost like I use the example of like a detective. If you think about like a traditional like crime story, mafia movie, you have the cop, he has the board, and he's got the mob boss and the capos under him and the soldiers, and he's got this victim and that victim. He's got all the stuff and he's looking to connect the dots, right? That's what parts work is. So it's taking what you feel and helping you understand it. So the inner critic, the perfectionist, those are common. What's also common, though, and this is really important this time of year, is there's a part of you, especially if you're listening to this, who really wants results, who like wants to see change, right? And there might be another part of you, though, who, is not willing to give up certain things, or is not willing to do what's required for the results the other part wants to see, right? So last week I talked about like behaviors and expectations. So this is the age old classic contradiction I see in weight loss. Is like there's a part of you that wants the best body ever now, actually last month, and then the behaviors though don't match what the expectations are, right? That's a big issue for so many of us in so many different things. So, but if you're using parts to apply it to that sort of contradiction, what's happening is there's a part of you who wants results significantly, and there's a part of you who's not willing, who's afraid, And afraid, by the way, could mean, it might sound crazy to you, but quite literally for a lot of people, especially if you've been overweight your entire life, there's a part of you that the deeper you go, you might recognize that there's a part of you that is sort of comfortable with being overweight. And I've seen that play out working deeply with so many different people. So if that part of you is existing, it's always going to be at odds with you that the other part of you that wants results. And so that's where the expectations get set up, because ultimately it's not going to last. And then the behaviors don't follow. And then the disappointment ensues, right? So parts work is about understanding these parts of you, and quite literally, just like their children, getting to understand what they are, but not also letting them like run the household, right? Like you wouldn't let your kids, you know, pick out all the groceries. You wouldn't give your 6-year-old your credit card and be like, hey, just control the finances, will you? Like you wouldn't do that, right? In that same way, though, these parts of us, they come into our life oftentimes during vulnerable points. And most often, or at least the strongest parts that are in us, came in during our childhood. Not to say maybe you had it doesn't mean that you had to have a tough childhood. Although if you did have a tough childhood, like there's definitely a trail of crumbs we can follow back there, right? But if you didn't, sometimes that can almost, when you didn't have a tough childhood, that can almost like be more problematic in a way when you're trying to figure out why you're stuck in the same patterns, because it's not as obvious. But the deeper you look, the more you look through things like hypnosis and parts work, you can really identify, oh, I developed these sort of tendencies because of this or whatever it might be. So parts work is just basically hearing these, like if your kid came to you because, there's a monster in a closet, you're not going to be like, you idiot. Monsters don't exist and they're not in your closet. Go back to sleep. Like you wouldn't say that to your kid. I hope not anyway, right? So but here's the problem. That's how we oftentimes treat our parts. We treat our parts like shit. Oftentimes, the parts that don't make us feel good, right? The parts of you who are scared, the parts of you who you might identify as lazy, although I wouldn't call them lazy. I would call it, there's another label there for that part. But if you do call it lazy and you do put it down, like, would you put down your kid? Gosh, I hope not. But if you're putting down that part of you, what do you think that's doing to your self-esteem? Certainly not self-love. And then you add in another layer when you do that, right? If you put down these parts of you, like stupid, bad, I'm fat, I'm stupid, I'm this, I'm fat, I'm lazy, I'm whatever it is, those parts of you are already hurt. And now you're just hurting even more. And you're teaching them to kind of stay dormant. And these are the parts that live in your shadow. You ever hear that expression? Carl Jung did a lot of work about shadow work. The shadow means like wherever you go, there they are. Like you can't really see them, but you can know that they're there, right? And these parts of you, while they might not be present in your top of mind, are regularly manifesting into your reality, generally in negative patterns. So the more you put these parts down, the more they stay in the shadow. So I like to say it's that whole expression of like, don't open Pandora's box, of like, no, fucking break that thing open. Like, I'm sorry, I should have said earmuffs. I don't know if there are kids around, but open the box. Because if you don't, those parts are going to come out and affect you. And for those of you guys who've heard me say this a million times, I apologize. But the example I always use here is like, imagine you had a beach ball. If you put a beach ball underwater, like you could put a beach ball underwater. You could. What would it require though? Constant force to push it down. And you would be able to hold it down with constant energy expenditure, but you couldn't keep it down forever. And at some point, it's going to pop back up with more force than it was when you pushed it down. So these parts of us that we label as bad, negative, whatever they might be, you can keep them in a box all you want, but it's requiring actually a lot more out of us in the background that we don't see to keep them out of our top of mind, to protect ourselves. That's really what the psyche's trying to do, is trying to protect you, right? So, and again, it's trying to protect you because its perspective is limited. It's a child, right? The protector, the earliest form of your psyche, its maturity level is a child. I'm not calling you, particularly you, a child. I'm just saying that's our psyches. Like they adapted into a world as a child. That was the first form of mechanism. Think about it. As a child, you're extremely vulnerable. Even if you live in the most loving family ever, you're a child. Like if you don't have parents or someone taking care of you, you're screwed. You ain't cooking for yourself. You ain't protecting yourself. Like there's nothing you can do for yourself when you're a child, right? So there are these parts that come into our life early on to protect us. And that's what's needed for survival, believe it or not, right? It's like if we didn't have those parts, it'd be very hard for you to grow up in some sort of structure and stay alive. But the issue isn't the parts. It's just that those parts never got checked. And so they just became automatic as life happened. And then tragedy hit, trauma hit, micro trauma hit, right? Sure, if you were sexually molested, which is sadly way more common than I had ever anticipated before getting into like the deep work I've been doing with hypnosis over the last several years. Very common, sadly. But if it's not something like we would all identify, or losing somebody close in your life at an early age, those are traumas we can all say, holy shit to, right? But that's not to downplay micro traumas that all of us have. And those micro traumas happen. These parts of you that are protecting you adapt to those micro traumas and go further and further and further down the line, away from who you are at your core, who you want to be at your core, who your psychic blueprint is for you to be at your core. It's not to say it's not always in you, it is, right? But it gets to like these parts of you take over. There's this primary parts and there's disowned parts. The primary parts are the ones that are sort of running the show, right? Without thinking. It's what we identify with most often. But the disowned parts are the ones that live in the shadow, that lurk in the shadow, that if they don't get addressed, they continually stay with us and get in our way without us seeing them. So when we talk about internal conflict, it's about bringing together the primary parts and the disowned parts in a loving way, just like you would with your kids. If your two kids are fighting, I have a 3 and a 5-year-old, they love each other, but there are little siblings, like they fight over, child shit, of course, right? They're kids. But, they're fighting over a toy. We're not going to kick them out of the house. You know what I mean? Like we're going to teach them. We're going to try to nurture them. We're going to try to come to some resolution that we can learn from and develop from, but in a loving way. But the parents are in charge, right? In your psyche, we got to get you in your driver's seat. We want those primary parts. Yeah, the part of you who, when you look in a mirror, who calls you fat, that part of you actually means well, believe it or not. I'm not here to encourage you calling yourself fat by any stretch. No. But that part of you is ultimately just trying to protect you because it's really scared that someone else is going to call you fat. It's really scared that maybe if you lose the weight, who will you be? Will you be loved? Will you be accepted? That might sound crazy to you, but this is what it comes down to so often when doing a lot of deep work with people. So when these parts that we want to identify as negative, I want you to take a step back. And if you have kids, think of them as your kids. You wouldn't want to be that mean to your kid. Therefore, you don't want to be that mean to yourself because these parts are really just an extension of your inner child. So we want to love them, but we also want to let them know you're in charge. So an example I like to use here is imagine your psyche is a psychological car, if you will. And right now, if you've not done this type of work before, which, look, they don't teach this stuff in school. They teach us to just listen and follow instructions and stay aligned and keep your mouth shut, talk when spoken to. Like that's generally what schools teach, right? They don't teach us emotional intelligence. And if they do in your school, gosh, that's awesome. Tell me about that. I'd love to know where that is because most schools don't. So we don't learn that there. And you could say, well, it's the parents' job, but is it? Like this is a major part of like life. Yeah, parents should be able to do it. But what if this? What if, like so many of us, Your parents are well-intentioned people who are byproducts of generational trauma. What if your parents immigrated into this country, and they immigrated into this country in a time where life was really, really hard? Maybe the Depression, where feelings, how about food? They didn't really get that space. They were just trying to eat and have somewhere to live. Right, wrong, and different, that's the reality. So then that gets passed down, though. If it was never learned, why would you know it? You wouldn't. So all of this goes back to having grace for yourself, love for yourself. That's really important. So, like, if it's not that you should know better. It's not that. And it's important. This is an important side note, because the parts of you that are carrying traumas, micro and macro, that's enough to deal with, right? You don't want to create layers of shame on top of that. Well, you should know better. What's wrong with you? Why do you think like that? Oh, gosh, here you go again. Remember, treat it like your kids. Love. So if we think about your psychological car, right now, for most of you, just like it was for me before I started doing this work, the primary parts are driving your psychological car, and you're just along for the ride. Your disowned parts are locked in a trunk. So what we need to do is pull over, pull over. Hey, primary parts, I love you. Get in the back seat. Get in the back seat. You don't get to tell us where to go. You're not touching the radio. You don't get to roll down the window unless I tell you you can. I love you, though. I do love you. I'm doing it with a smile. I love you. Get in a back seat. Getting a call. Sorry, again. We have a new here. I figure out what's going on. Okay. So with love, we want to get them in the back seat. Then we want to walk around to the back of the car, open up the trunk, and gently let out those parts that are really scared to express themselves, to show themselves. And a side note, a part that you wouldn't often think about, that is, I would say, and working with so many, particularly women who have, weight issues, who are bingy, who are fat, who are undisciplined, who are lazy. These aren't my words. These are words they've told me. But a part that is often the culprit for poor eating or closet eating, things like that, the part that is locked in a trunk for them, in a lot of cases, not always, a lot of cases though, is the inner rebel. The inner rebel. That part is disowned. At one point in their life, they had some adventure in them. They could go out and create or control. Then life happened. They became a mom, and then they had to get a job, and then they became the nurturer and the sort of running the household, and life just took them in that direction. And they became less and less of themselves, of really who they are at their core along the way. And in this crazy, chaotic world, lost full control over the things that are most important to them, which is what happens through life. And without any self-expression, because why would they? They don't have time. They're a mom. Again, I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that's how, it's easy to think that. The inner rebel comes in. Hey, like, you need to do something for yourself. It doesn't say it like that. No. It's like, you need some comfort, girl. You got a lot going on. He's looking, go downstairs in that pantry, whatever it might be. Go pull off the exit. Go grab an ice cream bar. You can control it. It's instant comfort. It fills a void short term. It gives you that sense of excitement and feeling good. And again, that's not for everybody, but that's a real thing. That is a real thing. When I work with people on a one-on-one basis, I always want to know, what is it that you want to do that you won't say out loud? And you know what? People have an answer right away. And I always say to them, when's the last time you said that out loud? I never have. When's the last time you thought about it? Years. So you haven't talked about it recently. You haven't thought about it consciously in a while, yet you were able to figure it out as soon as I asked you that question. Where do you think that's been living? It's been in you, slowly dying, right? And again, it's not always tied to eating, but certainly it's tied to happiness and how you feel about yourself and self-worth and self-esteem. All these things are related, So we take the dormant parts, the disowned parts out of the trunk, and we bring them into the car. Guys, hey, primary parts, push over. Come on, guys. Come on, there's room. Take a seat. All right, cool. And then your psychic self, who you are at your core. And you might say, well, how do I know what that is? What feels most natural to you? What doesn't feel like pressure? What doesn't feel like suffering? What doesn't feel like force? And the thing is like these levels of consciousness and and you can say like, that we oscillate up and down, in and out of these parts. It's not like it's only one way all the time. It's just that generally speaking, primary parts are on the show. But if you had to look back and ask yourself, like, what, you know, when in the last 6 months, last year, have I felt whole? And we hear a lot of that when women come in to define. And I'm not trying to like blow smoke up our ass. I'm just simply saying like the idea of like stopping what you're doing, investing in yourself, both with financial commitment, but also time, and doing something that makes you feel good, that's good for you, that does something to your soul. It's not an accident why we set up our facility the way we do, with the types of aspirations or around the walls and the smells, because it reinforces like, look, like you got to take care of yourself and you have more control over yourself than you think, right? That's why so many women will say when they come in, like, how much better they feel just by showing up. And that's just an example. I'm sure there are other things in your life. There's probably certain things that when you talk about, you get really excited about in a good way. There's probably something in your closet you'd like to fit back into and wear, but you don't feel comfortable. And maybe not because it doesn't fit. I had gyms for a long time. And one of my favorite parts of having a gym was, I can always envision this when it comes up. We'd have a new member. And ironically, it wouldn't always be a bigger woman or man, because that's a misconception. People think, oh, that fitter, younger, smaller, thinner, more athletic looking woman. Oh, I wish I was like her. Yeah, that one's like, I feel so insecure here. Oh, like they come in scared. New members, not all the time, but many times, people would come in a shell almost, because they've been in environments before, whether it's big box gyms, other situations, and they failed, or they were judged, or they perceived they were judged, whatever. And they would wear pretty neutral colors. It's just a thing I picked up. I don't know. It's a real thing. I mean, I have thousands and thousands of hours studying this stuff. Like this is not like an opinion. I'm very, very confident in this. It was a pattern of like coming in reserved. They would come in. We had group classes. They would stay to themselves. Their body language would be closed off. And then, we would do our best to introduce them to people and, move them along and progress them. They would keep coming because they kept coming. They felt better. We tended to all levels, so they were able to do stuff. And then when they were coming, because you keep doing it, you get better. And because they get better, they feel better. And because they feel better, they want to do more. And because they do more, they see even better results. And then all of a sudden, you got Sally, who first day one came in like black pants, black shirt, head down. She's going in with like Hawaiian spandex pants and like a pink top and a headband. And I'm like, fuck yeah, Sally. Like, yes, that's what I'm freaking talking about, man. That's what's up. Self-expression. That to her was something she wanted to wear. She might not be where she wants to be, but shit, she wanted to wear those colors and she did, but she didn't before. And so like, that's just a small byproduct of what is possible, what's in you. And so the more you can pull out these things that are slowly dying in you and extract them, it's only going to serve you in so many ways. So when we think about internal conflict, so many times the internal conflict is the pull between multiple parts who want opposing goals, who have opposing fears. The part who wants results is fearful that if she doesn't get results, she'll, her husband won't want to make love to her. She won't feel sexy anymore. She won't be accepted in society, whatever it might be, The other part, who's afraid, well, gosh, what if I do start changing? Will I still be loved? Will I still be accepted? This is how my family knows me. My whole family's overweight. Will I fit in? It's, you can say that might sound crazy, but that's how this stuff plays out. The point is, though, I don't know what it is for you listening to this. We're talking to a group here. But when you have internal conflict, there are multiple parts that are equally important, who ultimately mean well for you and to you, who have their own fears, who have their own desires, maybe like your kids. They're similar but different. And just like your kids, try to learn about them. Take time for them. Try to understand. And so here's a simple, practical way for you to do this. Journal is the easiest way. Now, people have a weird thing with journaling. I don't know why. It's taboo. Fine. But like get over it. Whatever. Like you would at least agree like exercise makes the body healthier. What do you think makes your internal space healthier? Neglect? Come on. You know that's not true. So then what can you do? Well, there's a lot you can do, but journaling is the easiest thing. So start journaling. Just do it. Take at least 5 minutes. You're worth it. And a way you can do this is to say with a sentence stem, a part of me feels, and just let that part just write whatever it is. That is so powerful. What you're doing is expressing that part of you. Through that expression, you're creating distance. When you create distance, you're creating objectivity and clarity. That part's feeling heard. And now because you have clarity and distance, you have objectivity. And you can start to say, actually, I know I got to lose weight, but I can actually do a 5-minute workout. That was silly of me. Silly Joe. You can start to understand and make decisions moving forward. So that's what I wanted to kind of talk about today in terms of internal conflict. I want to do a light hypnosis with you all. But before we do, any questions on anything we just talked about? Hold on, I got you. Allow audio. It's not working.
Okay.
There you
Here
go.
now?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you touched on a few points that I could get behind when it comes to internal conflict because it's been that way all my life. So it's not something that you can turn a switch off and on it, and I've never been skinny, so I really don't know what it was like. I've never been whatever the MetLife table way back when said what you should weigh. I've always been taller. I've always been bigger. It's just genes. But I've been thinner than I am now. But I've always been 25 to 40 pounds more than what that stupid schedule says. But I've also been almost 100 pounds heavier than I am now. So it's just it's a perspective thing for me. I have to talk to myself. When I get dressed and I look at myself in the mirror, I mean, I don't generally go out of the house unless it's to just get gas or something like that at good enough. I try to make sure that I'm happy with the fit and the way I look when I walk out of the house, or I'm just not going to be a happy person, period. I'd rather not go anywhere. But
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that's the thing, right? It's not a light switch. And you can also always improve, right? And so that's again like that's just an objective reality. But the emotions, the internal conflict get in the way of that, So stuff like hypnosis helps.